Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now commence the seminar. I, Itfa Khurshid Mirza, on behalf of President CAS, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, and the entire CAS team, welcome you to the 4th session of GSTAR 2022, Aerospace Security Determinants and Future Prospects. So without further delay, I would now like to introduce our moderator for today's session. Today's session will be moderated by Dr. Haque Shamsi, Director Peace and Conflict Studies, Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. I now invite Dr. Haque Shamsi to take on the proceedings, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahul Azim. On stage with me are Air Chief Marshal Tahir Rafiq Bhatt, Air Commodore Khalid Banuri, and Air Commodore Liaqat. Thank you, Itfa. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, tighten your seat belts because I am going to take you into space now. And we will do so at a hypersonic speed because this is the last session and we have 6 speakers across the globe. Starting from New Zealand, from where the new year starts, and perhaps the celebrations end on the western coast in San Francisco. So across, we will have to travel at a very high speed so that we are able to complete a session in the specified time. It is my honor to host the concluding session of GSTAR 2022. The last 2 days have been extremely enterprising, packed with highly knowledgeable discourse by distinguished speakers from around the world. The final session also promises our learned audience and viewers to provide insight into the developments related to space and perhaps beyond. The specific theme for this session is aerospace security, determinants, and future prospects. Let me first introduce our keynote speaker, Air Commodore Shaun Clarke from New Zealand, who will be speaking us online on the topic of future of manned versus unmanned aerospace operations. Shaun did plan to be here today, but unfortunately he could not make it due to circumstances beyond his control. Shaun is author of the book Strategy, Airstrike, and Small Nations, and has 10 other published works to his name on military air power. His bio is flashed on the screen, so I'll save some time on that, and I will request Shaun to please have the control now. Thank you.
Nek Kwahishat. And thank you to CAS President Air Marshal Farhat for his very kind invitation to join this highly esteemed GSTAR 22 conference. And may I just acknowledge my close friend and colleague in Dr. Zia Shamsi. Before I begin, I offer my country's sympathies regarding the floods in Pakistan. New Zealand prays for Pakistan's speedy recovery. I'm talking today through comments of my own. They're not attributable to the New Zealand government or to any other agency. I have produced a paper for GSTAR in an abbreviated form. In the next 15 minutes, I thought I'd just headline that paper by 3 topics. 1, the inevitability of a totally unmanned autonomous aerospace future. 2, the profound significance and implications of evolving autonomous air. And 3, the current state and the likely immediate future of autonomy. For the purposes of this paper, I consider unmanned aircraft to exist on a continuum from low-order autonomous air, that's automated systems such as beyond visual range weapons, through to semi and supervised autonomy, where the human either issues permissions or interventions, right through to futuristic self-determining machines with high-level human intelligence, which of course are yet to be invented by anyone except for Hollywood. What we currently experience as autonomous air largely involves doing the old job with the new technology. Platforms on missions that we have pre-programmed or are actively or intermittently steering through the sky to execute our tasks. What's in real prospect, though, on this continuum is advanced artificial intelligence leading to weapon self-determination and potentially the complete displacement of human judgment and decision-making in the kill chain. Many find that prospect immoral and abhorrent, and yet all indications are that R&D towards this end continues well-funded and largely unconstrained. And the question is the future of fully autonomous air inevitable? Well, the evolution is well underway, and there's little confidence that it might be banned before it's mature. It seems inevitable because so many previous revolutionary technologies reached full maturity before their effect was moderated in any way. Emerging military technologies follow a general pattern in history of evolving relatively unimpeded until they're fielded, affording the first mover a temporary advantage in conflict, and then evoking, of course, a necessary response from the defender, which is normally either acquisition of the same or similar capability, the development of countermeasures, and or the after-the-fact regulation of the capability through international accord or other. This pattern has applied to everything from the longbow to chemical weapons to cyber warfare. The spectre of fully autonomous air is well worthy of discussion in this conference, but let me suggest that if this conference wasn't happening now but in 850 AD, we might well be as concerned about the invention of gunpowder, and in 1066 about the crossbow, and in 1915 we'd surely be very worried about the first aerial bombing as it was carried out by an Italian in Libya. Surely the advent of autonomous air is no more paradigm shifting in warfare than the arrival of air power itself, and that wasn't banned. Other grounds for low confidence about a ban are that, first, autonomous air has been around for a very long time. So the horse has bolted, effectively. The first low-order autonomy in BVR weapons was operational in 1954, and we heard Dr. George Moore talk about the doodlebug quite a long time before that. Loitering munitions, such as the Israeli Harpy and the Tomahawk anti-cruise missile, both seek and destroy technologies, are well embedded in all bats, and the higher order development of autonomous air, China, Israel, Russia, South Korea, Australia, UK, the US, just to name a few, are already significantly invested in. Even in 2018, I think there were 90 countries experimenting militarily with autonomous air at some level. So, the political consensus necessary for a meaningful ban would be challenging. Second, many applications of autonomous air are non-controversial, such as reconnaissance and tankers, so why a ban? Third, some argue that autonomous weapons could ultimately be more reliable than humans, bring new levels of precision, and actually be more humane in war with less casualties and less collateral damage. And fourth, autonomous air is actually quite dissimilar to the sorts of weapon systems that have been successfully banned over time, like cluster munitions, chemical weapons, and blinding lasers. And it's not simply a device or a tool or a substance, but rather artificial intelligence and autonomy in multitudes of human domains. It is a paradigm. And attempting to ban a technology in war that is such high utility outside of war would be novel. Overall, achieving the consensus necessary to ban the ongoing development of autonomous air is extremely improbable. If continually evolving autonomous air is inevitable, how profound is the significance, and how do we need to respond ethically and legally? If one discounts banning autonomous air, then the two options are really to focus on better assuring that it's subject to and conforms with international humanitarian law. And the second, which is a midway between banning and making it comply with the law, is demanding extra regulation. And on the first point, the adequacy of extant humanitarian law really depends on whether, in Clausewitzian terms, fully autonomous air represents a change in the character of war, or whether it more fundamentally changes the very nature of war. The character of war is certainly changing. The number of aircraft involved in conflict will increase with the constraint of pilot numbers reduced. The frequency of conflict events is likely to increase, especially through grey zone warfare and hybrid warfare. Isolated combat events that are coercive and aggressive in nature, but which are deliberately designed to remain below the threshold of conventional military conflict, will grow and continue. There'll be an increase in the number of asymmetric warfare events. Terrorists and non-state actors, of course, will acquire the inevitable proliferation of technologies. The mode and tempo of air power employment will continue to transform because there will be ongoing improvements in the 4 S's of unmanned air power. That's size, speed, swarms, and stealth. We'll see new countermeasures arrive on the field. We've had some discussion in previous presentations. These will be designed specifically for unmanned aircraft. It is the history of warfare: measure, countermeasure, countermeasure. And we'll see the end, perhaps, of human air-to-air combat, as machine tolerance to G-forces well exceeds the physiological capabilities of the human body, and so on and so on. The character of war is definitely changing. Crudely, if fully autonomous air only represents a change to the character of war, then extant humanitarian law applies and the focus might well be on compliance. If not, we may need new law. The basic strength of international humanitarian law, and the reason it's been so enduring since the Hague Conventions, is that its principles address the nature of war, centering on the human ethics and decision making. But we now find humanity at the threshold of a new technology that could fundamentally change our relationship with war. And the only changing element has been the human, and we now contemplate taking the human out of the loop. I see the problem in 2 halves. In the most general terms, low order autonomy is about the removal of the human from the cockpit. High order autonomy is the removal of the human from decision making. The first is real now. The second situation is in prospect. The immediate future of now removing the human from the cockpit, man in the loop and man on the loop, is evolving with at least some clarity and certainty and with enough of its own issues. But the highest end of the continuum, without humans in the loop, there be dragons, some would say. Dragons that threaten to redefine the very nature of war, and that's where the power of existing humanitarian law to restrict activity will be tested. Extra regulation may be necessary. And at that point, we join an extensive global and multidisciplinary collective of peoples with shared concerns about not just autonomous air, but more fundamentally the artificial intelligence at the foundations of all things autonomous. AI is growing in self-drive cars, predictive policing, manufacturing, our financial markets, and so on. The ethical issues are complex and shared by all these realms, including privacy, responsibility and delegation of decision-making, transparency and bias, and we're not alone in the life or death decision-making matters either. If an autonomous vehicle is faced with a choice of how to recover from loss of control, and the 2 choices are to run over a child or alternatively to crash into a pole and potentially kill the passengers, which choice will it make? such dilemmas are real and current. In all matters of AI and its ZPAR applications, we need to make informed moral judgments about what strategies, permissions and constraints should apply. In AI ethics, there is now a solid body of theory and philosophy out there, but what is not so apparent is a corresponding body of law. So how do we develop the limits to AI and a credible institutional approach to enforcing those limits? What we do know is that labouring over the spectre of machine-made life or death decisions alone as air power specialists is naive and unnecessary. What we face is a tiny part of the greater challenge. AI pervades or will pervade every corner of our lives, and the issues around it involve every professional community. For the air power part of this, for Pakistan, for New Zealand, for the majority of the world's countries who are technology takers, we have an obligation to be at least intelligent participants in this space, to ask the concrete and penetrating questions and to insist in international forums on the development of both law and institutional enforcement. Just as nuclear capability has its laws and institutions such as non-proliferation treaties and the International Atomic Energy Agency. So, what's the current state of this transition to inevitable autonomy? A number of countries are investing heavily in R&D, but the general wisdom is that the evolution of AI adequate to mimic human judgment for combat decisions in the fog of war is perhaps decades off, although Marina Favaro was talking about 2040, which is only 2 decades. Perhaps the most reliable recent indication of where frontier capability stands comes from last month's Air, Space and Cyber Conference in the US. The dominant theme of that conference on autonomous air was teaming through collaborative combat air, CCA. The concept is for formations or networks of platforms working together comprising a manned lead aircraft supported by autonomous aircraft in a package. It's a pilot of a single combat platform in a contested environment who thereby gains multiple unmanned teammates to variously surveil the battle space ahead, carry out force protection measures, relay intelligence, communications, and if necessary, take programmed action on their own account or in concert with the rest of the force. The USAF's investment in the teaming concept is significant through the Skyball program, and in December 2020, 3 companies moved on to the flight experiments as part of that program. As of last month, the USAF is currently evaluating the XQ-58 Valkyrie from Kratos and the MQ-28 Ghostbat from Boeing Australia. And there are many other non-US teaming programs under development globally in Europe with FCAS, Future Combat Air, I forget what the S stands for, system, and further abroad. Given the problems of immature AI, challenged ethics and absent law around autonomy, focus on teaming and on keeping a human in or on the loop should be no surprise perhaps. The teaming concept also recognises that human-machine combinations are providing superior or proving superior to either humans or machines. The so-called Centaur AI, instead of focusing on replacing humans, focuses on augmenting humans. In 1997, you may recall IBM's Deep Blue famously defeated Garry Kasparov in chess. As of 2017, the world's preeminent chess player is not a human, nor a computer, but rather a combination of the two. The replacement of the fighter pilot in the next generation of combat aircraft is, it would seem, firmly off the radar. Work to see the fighter pilot augmented by flying robots rather than replaced keeps the human at the centre of difficult combat decisions in real time. It offsets critical pilot shortages, achieves mass, and balances the high cost of aircraft through attritable platforms. So it would seem that teaming is what might most characterize the next generation of combat air power. And to finish, to what extent will it replace combat air power? Well, in the manned combat air power in the US, if that's any indication, as a technology leader in part of this field, Chief of Navy Operations Admiral Mike Gilday's 2045 navigation plan now sets the goal at 60% of the United States Navy future carrier air wing as being uncrewed. And it names the development of smaller, cheaper CCAs to do a lot of the fighting alongside the F-35C and next generation fighters. That total could mean approximately 780 of the carrier-based fleet would be uncrewed. In the interest of time, I'll leave it there, but I do look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Shaun. Thank you very much. I understand it is late night in New Zealand on 20th October. Now let's go back to very, very early morning on the west coast of 20th October, and our next speaker is Dr. James Wirtz, who will be speaking to us from the west coast. And as I promised in the beginning that I will skip the long introductions because they're flashed on the screen. However, I must make a mention about Dr. James' book on Understanding Intelligence Failure, Warning Response and Deterrence, published in 2016, apart from dozens of other books and so-called edited volumes. Doctor will be speaking to us on a specific topic of weaponization / militarization of space, strategic choices for global players. Dr. James, go ahead, please.
Well, Dr. Shamsi, thank you for this wonderful invitation to speak to this great audience, a great gathering. I too would like to express my condolences about the recent flooding in Pakistan. As you know, there's been a hurricane in Florida, so the danger and damage done by water is apparent to Americans too. So we understand the situation you're in, and we wish you a speedy recovery. I think I'd like to push some slides out to you. We'll see if that works. So today I'm going to talk about weaponization and militarization of space, strategic choices for global players. And the presentation is really in three sections. First, we'll have some preliminary thoughts, a little bit of background, to make sure we're all off the same sort of common understanding of the situation. Then we'll have some qualifications for strategists. When I conceived of this presentation, I was really thinking about sort of military strategists, political strategists, how to conceive of the space militarization problem. And then finally, some brief thoughts about what will global players do when it comes to the militarization of space. So some preliminary thoughts as just a little bit of background about the topic. So you can see some pictures from the early American space program, the idea of some preliminary thoughts. Well, the first question really emerges, is space weaponized and militarized? I guess in a sense, posing the question means that there is some debate or doubt about whether this has occurred, but that really is a matter of debate. And it's always been a tricky question, especially from an American and even a Russian-Soviet perspective. Americans and Russians always dodged the question. In fact, we have a picture here of Eisenhower with the formation of NASA, in the sense that NASA was going to be originally was going to be a cover, a front, or an explanation for American military activity in space. It went on to be a great civilian space program, but there was always an idea there that this would provide some cover. In a sense, that was eventually abandoned relatively early in the process of American exploration of space, because it was no longer really an issue. But in the early days of space activity, there was a lot of fear on the part of the Eisenhower administration that, you know, orbiting a satellite over the airspace or space of another nation would be seen as an act of war. And they actually breathed a sigh of relief in the White House when Sputnik overflew the United States and the Russians didn't have much to say about it. Well, the Outer Space Treaty also really doesn't have a lot to say about the militarization of space. You know, the Outer Space Treaty bans nuclear weapons in outer space, and it also says there's no basing of weapons on other planets, but the limitations created by the Outer Space Treaty are relatively insignificant, especially in terms of the activities we're looking at in the future. Well, some options in space, some military options in space, really are fully exploited. You know, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, communications, and navigation are being fully exploited for both civilian and military applications. There really isn't much effort spared in these regards. These are fully exploited kinds of activities. By contrast, other options, you know, anti-satellite weapons, ASAT, those are relatively slow in terms of their progress. They're there, they're available to many states, but at the same time, there's not really a real rush to exploit these kinds of technologies. On the other hand, hypersonic weapons right now seem to be, there's a real emphasis on those hypersonic weapons. So in that sense, there is more of an emphasis on this and a rush to exploit these sorts of things. But the real question here is the cup half full or half empty. I mean, that's how that sort of idea is expressed in American English. But it's really the idea are we really militarized, or are we really seeing a lot of reluctance or moderation on the parts of all concerned not to militarize space? But I'm of an open mind. I could. If people want to argue that it's fully militarized, I would be more than willing to listen to that sort of argument. Well, when we talk about space and the militarization of space, we're talking about projecting power in, from, or to space. And there's a whole long list here of different kinds of applications and weapons, right? We have Earth to space kinetic sort of applications. That would be ASAT weapons that, you know, ascent from either ground-based interceptors or from airborne interceptors. You have Earth to space non-kinetic sort of activities. Those would be jamming, labors, cyber actions taken to affect platforms in space. We have space-to-space kinetic operations. Those are co-orbital sort of activities. Space-to-space non-kinetic, co-orbital jammers, microwaves, lasers. You have space-to-Earth kinetic. That's sort of the so-called rods from gods. In other words, that there'd be a high-velocity, hypersonic, non-explosive sort of round fired at a specific target, and that you would destroy the target through kinetic energy. And you also have space-to-Earth, non-kinetic sort of weapons with lasers and jammers. So there's a whole range of activities here when you begin to talk about what would it be to militarize or weaponize space. Two things to keep in mind, though, is that the non-kinetic effects, they're either permanent or temporary, and that's an important sort of consideration. The other thing is that space kinetics is going to create a debris field. As my colleague Clay Moles has written in his sort of environmental theory of space activity, is that debris field could have a lasting impact on space activities for an indefinite future. So there's a real lasting negative impact of the militarization of space when we're talking about kinetics. Well, what kind of qualifications do we have for strategists when we talk about space? Well, the first is that I think when strategists think about space, when military planners or policymakers think about space, there's a tendency to think about it as a silver bullet. This is sort of an idea drawn from the American Old West, where there is a special round in the weapon that It can have an enormous impact, an out of the ordinary impact. It's sort of a war-winning weapon. And that's really the whole idea here, is that is a space weapon going to be a war-winning, a completely game-changing, a silver bullet kind of weapon out there. And what we have here is Colin Gray, the famous British strategist, who had a lot of doubts about the constant quest for silver bullets in war. The idea here is that more often than not, that these silver bullets really are a chimera. They don't really exist. They really exist in the minds of the proponents, but they really have less of an effect than their advocates would lead us to believe. Now, space is really a domain of operations. It's not one weapon, it's many, many weapons. But I think Gray's point here is well taken. When we think about the weaponization of space, the militarization of space, we're thinking about specific kinds of weapons. And the idea that these would be complete game changers, war-winning kinds of weapons, well, people who make that argument is really on their shoulders to make that kind of argument. It's not obvious on its face. Two other concerns that should also come to mind, and that's the arrival fallacy and technological surprise. Well, the arrivals fallacy is really very similar to the silver bullet kind of idea. We have a picture here of a nice tank with its reactive armor, and I'm sure when the people created this tank, they believed that this would be a game-changing, war-winning weapon, that this is the be-all and end-all of tanks. Well, that would be the arrival fallacy, right? Once this tank is here, progress in warfare, progress in weapons, progress in strategy, technology, tactics, operations comes to a halt. But on the bottom right corner, we see this fine Ukrainian soldier armed with an N-Law, and that N-Law can now defeat that tank in its reactive armor. Well, the idea here is that just because advocates of space weapons point to these weapons as sort of game-changing kind of developments, you have to understand that the history is constantly moving forward, and there is always, for every weapon, there is a counter weapon. And that really gets back to the idea of technological surprise in war. The bottom left corner, we have Michael Handel in his book, War, Strategy, and Intelligence. And Handel really was a skeptic when it came to technological surprise in war. He believed whatever technological surprise was available to one state, the effects of this were going to be fleeting, that they would be easily overcome or rapidly overcome by opponents. So the idea here is that weapons, space-based weapons, are going to be these game-changing weapons that will have a permanent and lasting impact on warfare, is probably exaggerated given the history of warfare. Finally, when we think about weapons in space, we have to think about the process of weaponization, what have you. So the idea that we have a weapon, we're talking about weaponization. What I would suggest is we always have to keep in mind: are we talking about science experiments, sort of equipment that can be demonstrated that could potentially work, or do we have a fully integrated weapon, integrated into delivery systems, integrated into a force, integrated into doctrine? That takes a great deal of work on the part of military officers to do that. So the idea here is whatever happens in space, militarization of space isn't just a technology experiment. It really has to be integrated across into a whole military infrastructure. So I guess now we get to sort of the punchline, of the endpoint of the presentation is, well, what will global players do with this new kind of technology in space? Will it be weaponized? Will we move forward? Well, which dynamics will govern this future sort of developing military situation in space? Well, will we see arms race dynamics begin to emerge? This is the idea that there's going to be a monitoring, matching of an opponent's offense or defense's advances. And I think the truth is right now we are in a very moderate, slow-moving arms race in space, where all the key players are watching what the other key players are doing, and they're trying to replicate or one-up or counteract the advances made by the others. So this is a sort of a slow-moving process. It is occurring in the sense that the parties concerned are really monitoring what's going on. The second idea is, so, okay, will this be actually, will states move forward? And that's really based on a cost-benefit calculation. Is this moving into weaponizing space or using force in space? Is that going to benefit you or your opponent more? And here the real question is who is most dependent on space as a backbone, as a key enabler of its terrestrial sort of activities. So on the one hand, what you really don't want to do is run into a situation, for example, with the British dreadnought, where you introduce a whole class of weaponry that renders your entire into the British Navy obsolete. Well, here, do you really want to introduce a weapon or a type of warfare that renders your entire military obsolete, especially if you're a leading military? So that's a really important question. Another issue that could occur is that there's a fait accompli sort of situation here, is that there is a real incentive to use space, to use that advantage of space to achieve a fait accompli, to launch a surprise attack, and to really steal that march on an opponent. Now, as I said earlier, the advantage by this could be very short-lived, so that's a real gamble to sort of bank it all on being able to trump the opponent using a newfound space capability. But that's not that sort of activity has occurred in the past. And then finally, we've sort of got the rods from gods sort of scenario, where that you use space-enabled technologies to attack less capable states from outer space without having to get involved in sort of terrestrial environment. You literally can deliver that kinetic force from space, and you don't have to involve ground troops or aviation or what have you. So I think this is sort of the wide range of dynamics that are currently involved in national choices over space. And in some ways, we're seeing all of these things play out, except maybe for the fait accompli or the rods from gods. But I mean, all these dynamics are potentially out, and all these are potentials we could see for soon. Well, thank you for your attention. In fact, I'm actually not on the West Coast today, and I have to say that it's an amazing world we live in, because I'm really talking to you from Honolulu this evening or tomorrow afternoon your time. But it really goes to show that we couldn't have done this 10 years ago, and that space is such an enabler that it allows us to have this sort of global communication capability, and we're really growing more and more dependent on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor James from the West Coast. We really appreciate your understanding about the importance of subject and the importance of GSTAR 2022, and thank you for your contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, before I invite the next speakers, may I request you all to kindly settle down, because please try and understand that this hall is very big. There is a lot of echo otherwise, and your movement is causing some discomfort, perhaps to the speakers also and the audience also. Thank you very much for that. Our next speakers are Dr. Damon Coletta, who is currently serving as Director, Eisenhower Center for Space and Defense Studies, and he will be speaking to us from Denver. And the time over there at this time is 0300 hours early in the morning. I must say and point out his publication on counting or coding science, securing the foundation for a second American century, a very, very significant book. He is ably supported by Dr. Sannia Abdullah. They will share the time, who is a political scientist working on non-proliferation and regional security issues for over 10 years and hosts a podcast show, Women with Ambition. Thank you very much, and Dr. Damon, you can start.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shamsi. Thank you for this invitation to address the thought leaders in Pakistan on air and space power. Our topic today, the topic that you requested, is the hybrid character of aerospace power. And as you mentioned, I am assisted by my colleague, Sannia Abdullah Close, and what we thought we would do as our team, and as a preview of our paper project that we were working on, is talk about the nature of aerospace power. And then she will come in, she will introduce herself and talk about the implications of this theoretical evolution for Pakistan and Pakistani strategy in particular. I think the two talks by Professor Wirtz and our talk are complementary because our main thesis on aerospace power as hybrid power is that was true in the beginning of thinking about aerospace power, but that is becoming less true, particularly after the Gulf War, which here in the States is considered the first space war. So our idea is that while aerospace power was considered hybrid power by many of the leading strategic thinkers, that in the future we're going to see air power distinct from space power. And what that means, what that implies for many countries, including Pakistan, is that you will see, instead of aerospace power, a combined arms philosophy, where air power theory is proceeding on one path, space power theory is proceeding on another path, and you have a combatant commanders type of perspective where there is a mission or an operation and they are trying to combine their assets and combine their instruments to meet mission. What Professor Wirtz was talking about was the very beginning of aerospace power in the Eisenhower era in the 1950s. And what you saw there was that assets in space and assets that were designed to be used in the atmosphere were being combined to develop nuclear capabilities. And the theorists at that time recognized that when you combined aerospace power as hybrid power, you had another problem, which is that you didn't want a general exchange, of course, of nuclear weapons. So your designs and your strategy had to take deterrence into account as much as warfighting. But what we've seen, and what you hopefully can see on the slide as we are attempting to share our screen, is that in parallel with this idea of hybrid aerospace power, we've had developments in air power on the one hand and space power on the other hand. And I wanted to say myself that the perspective that I'm bringing to you today is really an academic perspective and a professor's perspective. I think with the other distinguished panelists here, one perspective that we can provide is this is the basic lesson that we are teaching to our Air Force cadets. So our future officers and our young officers are learning today that air power theory is traveling a path that is distinct from space power theory. So that is what you see here. And one thing that I would point out on the air power side, this audience is very familiar with the idea of strategic bombing and precision bombing, but just this year, particularly in response to the situation with the Russia-Ukraine war, there's an idea that air superiority may not be the only concept in air power, but we may be talking about air denial, trying to accomplish a mission of air denial without being able to send manned aircraft or automated aircraft, unmanned aircraft into the space. So how do you deny air superiority or access to the air from the other side without being able to establish air superiority yourself. So air power is continuing to evolve. Theories of air power are continuing to evolve, and those evolutions are taking us on a distinct path from space power. So aerospace power of the early Cold War up to the 1990s is resolving into two different types of theories, air power and space power on the other hand. If you are able to see the space power column, as I mentioned before, the first ideas of space power were combined with air power to develop a concept of aerospace power that was highly integrated with nuclear weapons and ideas of deterrence. As you move down from the Eisenhower era to the current era, you have books coming out, again, very recently, 2020, 2022, that are talking about space as a cosmic coastline. Again, very distinct from air power. In fact, drawing on metaphors and analogies of continental sea power, not air power, to talk about how space would be utilized for strategic objectives. Okay, so here are some of the activities, the strategic activities that would come to the fore as you talk about air power on one side and space power on the other. The idea that it looks like we are moving toward, so my students who are students today but will be leading officers in 10 or 20 years, they'll be thinking as combined arms commanders, as combatant commanders. They'll be looking at their ground assets, their sea assets, air assets, and space assets, and attempting to combine the strengths of those into single operations to meet mission. And what has been enduring through all of this is combining those instruments, so air power on the one hand, space power on the other, to deny the enemy, to make life more difficult for the enemy so that they can neither hold ground nor concentrate forces. I've been talking to you from a perspective of the American literature, the books and the articles that we use to teach our students and future officers. I wanted to bring in my colleague, Sannia Abdullah, to talk about, who's an expert on Pakistan, and to talk about what this Western thinking, if you will, might imply for Pakistan's strategic future. So, Sannia, I would like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Cass, for inviting us. So, I have to... Oh my God, I'm doing something wrong here for sharing my screen.
Would you like me to continue sharing, Sannia?
Yes, I would appreciate that.
Okay, I can go ahead and continue, and then you can just speak. Just let me know when you would like me to switch the slides. I will share my screen once again.
Yes, I think that would be great. Thank you, everyone, for inviting us, and it's an honor to be here on the panel sharing with Professor Damon. Yes, we are working on this project, and Dr. Shamsi was kind enough to adjust me on the panel. I think what we have discussed about Pakistan is what could be the implications of what Professor Damon has laid out in terms of airspace and aerospace. And I think our consensus was the way the literature has told us, and learning lessons from the great powers like United States, it would be better for Pakistan not to reinvent the wheel, but in fact take the lead from where the great powers are already have learned their lessons, and we carry it on forward. Just to have a clear understanding for the students who are sitting in the audience, how Pakistan's aerial or combat strategy actually looks like. Pakistan's Air Force, may I have another slide, please? Pakistan's Air Force strategy or Air Force mission actually looks like that it wants to provide the synergy with each other with each other inter-services, the most efficient, assured, and cost-effective aerial defense of Pakistan. And the key word here is cost-effective. Given the Pakistan's economic challenges and the nascent space program that Pakistan is gearing towards, it's important to understand why Pakistan is moving in a direction where it is heading to. So Operation or Project Azam resolve that Pakistan Air Force actually launched in 2017 with a clear indication that they want to actually induct fifth generation fighter planes, and they want to introduce medium altitude, long endurance, unmanned aerial vehicles. I think, next slide, please. We do see that Pakistan's latest procurements are gearing towards one, fighter aircraft that Pakistan is trying to acquire or is in the process of acquiring from China, J-10C. And we have another premier partner, which is Turkey, from where Pakistan is getting long altitude and medium altitude, long endurance unmanned aerial vehicles. So as we have discussed already all this morning, where the modern warfare is heading towards, and also seeing how Russia and Ukraine war has been played out, the role of UAVs have been very critical. While these weapon systems are very important because they are also PGMs, they are cost effective, easy to acquire, they have high value targeting capability, they're good for surveillance and reconnaissance. What is very critical, I think, that has not been stressed upon today is the factor that there are critical problems with the UAVs, and that is they can be hacked. Enemy forces or adversary can get rid of digital signatures and steal the data, which could be the surveillance or reconnaissance information regarding the enemy forces in ground positions. Now, once your drone or UAV is hacked, what do you need actually most to have them safe from that is the cybersecurity. And for that, I think the anti-UAV defense system, which actually comprises of scanning the skies and jamming the enemy's control signals by using your high-powered radio signals, is important. And in the cyber, I think there are all different types of attacks that come in. The most important and hard to protect yourself against is man-in-the-middle attack. And those who are experts or studying cybersecurity would better understand that man-in-the-middle attack is the one where enemy can easily exploit the security vulnerability and inject control commands to interact with the compromised UAV. So what essentially happens is that your asset can turn into a liability. And this is something that you as a state would not want it to happen. And that's where I do understand that how unmanned aerial vehicles are important, but if a country does not have a good cybersecurity architecture or infrastructure with experts in that domain, it would be very hard to execute UAVs in the modern warfare. So I would go ahead in the other slide and a little bit talk about what Pakistan's airspace strategy currently or the rubric looks like. We're trying to actually follow on still action reaction syndrome, trying to seek technological edge vis-a-vis India. I do see that Pakistan is coming, again, its military strategy is coming from the fear of war hysteria, which is traditionally based on 1971 dismemberment, and rightly so, those fears and paranoia is making us move or concentrate more on the air-land battle concept. And that air-land battle concept is largely concentrated on the geographical compulsion because Pakistan shares a long border with India. So here, that's a challenge, I think, for Pakistan's air strategy, that if we keep thinking about the airspace strategy from the perspective of the ground forces, or concentrate more on the air-land battle concept, it will be hard for Pakistan to keep moving with the latest trends, because air has to have some kind of a dominance in that domain. So going ahead in another slide, which says what are the possible missing links in Pakistan's airspace strategy, I think Pakistan has a greater reliance on China for the space domain. And the reason is, of course, that Pakistan's space capabilities are not very advanced. So right now, if you're thinking about network-centric warfare, that was already discussed in the morning, that India is trying to develop synergy between its air and land and space capabilities. Pakistan has a challenge that it is looking towards its adversary through China's eyes. Well, it is good as long as these countries are cooperating, and there's no doubt about the level of friendship between Pakistan and China. The challenge could be that the international community can come up with some kind of sanctions or some kind of obligations for China to limit or restrain its cooperation with its international partners. And Pakistan is not the only one who is in this space cooperation with China. So space is expensive domain, and cost-effective symmetric strategy is not going to work. So my understanding is that Pakistan, in its current state of position, should focus on non-kinetic approaches of warfare instead of trying to up the ante, because every time when Pakistan has tried to do that, even Pakistan has exercised restraint in the recent crisis, it did not echo well in the international community. The message was not conveyed. The positive effect that Pakistan wanted to generate out of its gesture was not received. So nuclear threats is also seen in case of Russia right now. After a certain time, they have their limits, and they do not go up to a level where countries can go for using a nuclear response. So possibly Pakistan can have options to, they can target space satellites from the grounds, and Pakistan has systems that it is acquiring and has capabilities in that direction. I would quickly go to another slide, what Pakistan can do. First of all, for the space exploration and space expenditure, or in fact also airspace domain, macroeconomic stability is very important for any country. And Pakistan has a critical infrastructure problem that starts from its space education to training and technology. So we have three important areas to focus on. Also, Pakistan has to shift from air-land battle traditional concept to airspace battle concept and not aerospace, something that Professor Damon has clearly articulated in the first half of the presentation. That is, we have to move from the hybrid to combined arms philosophy. Another important aspect of Pakistan's cooperation is with the United States and great powers. We have to foster relations with multilateral countries. And how can we do that? Yes, that's a challenge. The biggest question, I think, for right now for Pakistani policymakers is, what can Pakistan offer to the world? There are three areas that are critical, that the world is moving forward and the great powers are moving forward. The first one is definitely space exploration. The second one is climate change. And the third one is internet and Web3 domain. Sadly, Pakistan is very, very far behind in all of these three disciplines. In climate change, we are literally part of the problem and not part of the solution. We are on the receiving end. So these are the issues that Pakistan can actually develop expertise and move forward, and maybe have some opportunities for the world to take interest in and come forward to cooperate with the Western powers. What could be an area for the future cooperation between Pakistan and other countries? And that will be my last slide. I think there is a hope for Pakistan and the United States to have some kind of a joint workshop or joint war games focusing on the non-kinetic warfare. Both Pakistan and the United States Air Forces can tease out the limitations of technology in that domain and see what could be the effects on the traditional security. We are not only talking about cyber, we are also talking about information warfare, electronic warfare, and how they can play out in the current conflict dyads, and how far we can actually develop our expertise of proportionate response towards each other. And that's very critical, because proportionality is, again, an underlying factor of your response options. So hypothetical scenario that I can literally play out is very simple. We cannot even think about going for a really traditional crisis, but we can literally think about a simple crisis that can actually transform into a traditional conflict. Pakistan or India, grid stations are attacked, leading to a nationwide electricity fallout. And even if the Pakistan's or India's military command control centers or nuclear command control centers are protected against the cyber threats, the challenge is that within hours, the simultaneous cyber attacks on the grid stations will affect everyday life. And it would call a national emergency in the country because everything is relying on electricity. So you have a social, political, and economic chaos developing from traffic signals to the air control channels that are being disrupted, to financial transactions that are halted, to the hospitals and people who are living on the life support over there. So all these factors can actually halt a country and bring it to the knees even if the nuclear or the traditional security threat is not involved. With that, I would just conclude and would be looking forward for more questions from our students or the audience. But I think the broader consensus is that airspace as a hybrid is not as significant as we can move towards the combined arms approach and find synergy between different levels and capabilities of the forces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Damon and Dr. Sannia. 3 o'clock in the morning and a very, very charged and energetic presentation. Thank you very much. Now we come back to Pakistan, and in this hall, I have the honor to invite Air Commodore Khalid Banuri. As I promised that I will not go in long introductions because they are flashed on the screen. However, I must make a mention of at least two things. One, that he is an expert on arms control and disarmament affairs. And number two is one of the very few officers of Pakistan Air Force or even the Pakistan Armed Forces who have received both the medals, that is civilian award and the military award. Sir Banuri, floor is yours.
I have an administrative announcement. Since everybody at the back is now behaving, no death by PowerPoint for all of you. But I will not resist showing a couple of slides. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Chairman, Air Chief Marshal Zahir Rafiq Bhatt, Air Chief Marshal Abbas Khattak, President Cass, Air Marshal Farhat, PF seniors, ladies and gentlemen, especially my friend and colleague for many years, Dr. Shamsi. For most of the 2 days since yesterday, we heard of the issues that ail this world. We learned of the global lens and the major challenges that the world needs to tackle. We noted what could possibly enhance the impact of the geoeconomics in this region. We thought of how new and emerging technologies could change, hopefully for the better, our futures. And now, in continuation of such themes, it would make some sense to consider some implications that impinge upon the South Asian security environment. After some sweat and tears, now it's time to draw blood. Ladies and gentlemen, the world as we know is in a flux politically. No more unipolar, not yet multipolar, with major powers still in conflict as well as in cooperation, some rising, some declining, but still with very strong capabilities. The emergence of new alliances, the center of gravity is in a flux as well. No more application of whether whoever rules the heartland or the rimland rules the world. It is also nebulous what the new center of gravity really is. Is it technology? Is it big data information? Or is it the post-truth recurrence or the emerging consciousness of the human mind? And then the subject at hand today in this session. What does all this or some of it mean for or affects the role of aerospace power? And what about the impact of it on South Asia? Is that in that Pakistan and India? More importantly, what could this mean to the rest of the world, for the rest of the world? So in this backdrop, I would just skim the surface through a level of analysis framework to arrive at the implications for South Asia. So this is by and large the direction I'm taking. I'm looking at the domains of geopolitics, geoeconomics, technology, doctrine and posture, look at some significance and importance, and then eventually offer some thoughts on the response or the option that we can see. As a promise, I'll let the slides sit there while we talk about the aerospace power evolution. The aerospace power, as we know classically, implies anything that moves through the medium of air and space. That in the earlier times may have meant air power, in that mainly an extension from the air in the beginning of an artillery function. The advancements and innovations nevertheless continue to happen in the later times. But in today's parlance, it would not only include air power exercised by modern air forces, including missiles and UAVs, but also the use of space for military functions, including but not limited to the communication satellites. In this backdrop, the United States, for example, includes in its mission air and space dominance, which India, as we know, was quick to emulate, as it did in establishing an outfit akin to the US Space Command. The aerospace power, which is not kinetic only anymore, has all the buzzwords in its remit. No contact is beyond the classic BVR missiles. The multi-domain includes air, space, unmanned vehicles, artificial intelligence, and more. The network-centric can involve cyber, drones, and even media. All of these are subjects by themselves. The cross-domain includes overlapping yet two or more different aspects, all contributing to the same mission. So let me cherry-pick some thoughts about aerospace power. While we heard the debate about the manned aircraft and helicopters and manned vehicles, it appears that the space, being the common heritage of mankind, has moved to the militarization in which the regularization attempts are now largely the arms controllers' coffee club, since nothing significant has come out. And we've heard of the efforts that were made for controlling the space in some way, avoiding weaponization space, etc., etc. It might be prudent to assume that in the contemporary world, virtually nothing remains hidden from space capabilities. From eye in the sky, the globe has moved to eyes everywhere from space. India, of course, has been consistent about developing its space program in a variety of skill sets supported by development. It has 47 operational satellites, including 21 communication satellites, 18 for remote sensing, 7 for navigation, as well as a separate ELINT capability. In pursuance of its February 2019 aggression over Pakistan, it went ahead with an anti-satellite test in May 2019. It also generates a large revenue through the provision of satellite launch services, and in addition to its own, has done 346 such launches for 36 countries. With sustained effort, one can make several assumptions regarding an integrated use of aerial command and control, secure communications and data link, jamming, precision in navigation and targeting, battle damage assessment, support to the ballistic missile defense systems during conflicts. It goes without saying that access to US data in the backdrop of various agreements or understandings through Indo-US cooperation in space also raises its potential. In contrast, Pakistan has embarked on a clear Space Vision 2047 path, but there are many significantly large milestones to be traversed. Most of this may be owed to the need for sustained funding, applicability of space law, also arguably the involvement of private sector in the use of space where commercial potential exists. For example, the satellite launch capability. While this sector picks up its progress and it will take its time, Pakistan continues to tap the other elements of the aerospace ecosystem. In the global sense, major powers, rivalries and preferences tend to raise a security dilemma for this region. And that's the argument I want you to consider. For example, what the United States or Russian Federation for that measure considers needed or essential is to work closely with India for their respective national interest, without necessarily taking into account the adverse impact that it generates due to the legacy of mistrust and suspicion between India and Pakistan. The recent United States National Security Strategy formalizes the notion of integrated deterrence, suggesting cross and multi-domain response options. So if one option is not suitable, they move to another in this response and not directly go in the same domain. I'm purposely being cynical here to suggest that India would be quick to nationalize this US approach. And there has been recently a lot of discussion about a certain cohesion in the South Asian context. What really in context, in my view, is the issue of temperance, denoting balance or the lack of it by some major powers regarding South Asia. It is this lack of balance in the approach of some major powers, in particular the United States, which tends to augment Indian arrogance and hostility. Add to this another recent, though a repeat phenomena, of the rise of ultranationalism across the world, or the ultranationalist leaders that have been called Trumpism in the past. The obvious manifestation of it in our region is the Indian political party BJP, currently led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. These two global trends manifest themselves in a regional context in two ways. One, a number of alliances have developed ostensibly for different reasons, yet with adverse spillover effect for our region. On one side are the alliances like Quad, or those supposedly dealing with strategic or sensitive technology controls, which are often discriminatory in nature. And that's the sense of, just to give you a glimpse of the geoeconomics side of it, is a commerce country chart. It's a detailed chart from United States, any exports that can happen, and the control that it exercises. I've kind of, it's the whole world, but I've picked India and Pakistan on that. You can see 1, 2, 3 written in several of those. The tier 1 of these technologies are related to cutting edge technologies, nuclear weapons related technologies, weapons of mass destruction, delivery systems, or related protection technologies. The United States normally does not export such sensitive items to any of its allies, except in very few cases, like some missile exports to the United Kingdom in the past. As obvious from this chart, you can see the restrictions on technology exports. India now has access to such technologies in every sphere except maybe 1 or 2 very sensitive ones. This implies that Indian companies do not require a license from the United States to import these items in the US control list, including inertial navigation or associated systems. This led to a major boost after an ST1 waiver for the components for the Indian LCA Teja, which had stalled for years due to technical hurdles. There have been also some agreements between the two countries, United States and India, in the recent years. LSA is a logistic support agreement opening horizon for the Indian Air Force to use United States air bases or associated facilities and vice versa. BECA is related to mutual sharing of remote sensing data, meaning Indian satellites are also at US disposal and vice versa. And BECA facilitates the US a lot in a way to monitor part of Asia through Indian-based downlink facilities. Then there's another agreement called COMCASA, which is related to secure communications and its associated equipment. It gives the Indian Air Force access to secure means of communications used by the United States. However, the furbishing, replenishment, or rectification of the equipment still remains with the US. Such agreements, providing US waivers for Indian imports, also lead to a desire in other countries elsewhere to get a piece of the pie, get that business. something that is often called FOMO, the fear of missing out. And it gives unbridled access to India to other international markets. In summary, India has been facilitated with import benefits for its air bases, associated support, secure communications, satellite remote sensing data, high-tech equipment for Teja and other developmental projects. The US in turn closely benefits to watch our region through Indian satellite downlink centers, suggesting accuracy of sensitive data. Let me say a bit on the Indian doctrinal stance and posture. Peace was fragile in this region until Pakistan restored the strategic balance in response to the second series of Indian nuclear tests in May 1998. Due to this restoration, the fragility of peace was not as provocative as it used to be in the NATO-Warsaw Pact during the Cold War, which carried launch on warning kind of trigger-happy doctrines. However, this wasn't sustainable. Today, the recipe for disaster looms larger than before through an Indian tendency to escalate at every level possible. The Indian misadventure during Balakot Pulwama is a manifestation of that. Militaristic designs and weapons readiness adds to that fragility. India's BJP is currently in its second tenure of government, led by a Prime Minister who has not only moved India away from its secular approach to a Hindu-dominant approach, somewhat like the Nazi Germany, and they have this Hindu superiority attitude. This has encouraged an intense intolerance against other religions in India, notably the Muslims. One can say that it's a domestic problem to be tackled by the Indians themselves, and that will be true. In fact, the traditionally secular part of Indian society has objections to this approach. Our problem is that we are right next door, and the spillover of such extremism tends to intensify reactions, and that is our concern as well. Also, when you look at this in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the IOJK, you can see the alien occupation by India and the ensuing war crimes in IOJK creates a host of associated problems. With such intense emotive tendencies running high, the Western world in general and the United States in particular, putting India as its strategic partner, encourages India to become a regional hegemon, often ignoring the United Nations Security Council process. But the world also knows that Pakistan, like some other countries of this region, will never accept India as a regional bully. What then is the intent here? To lead this region to an armed conflict? For its part, let's keep in view that BJP's last election manifesto in 2019 has a stark fact and commitment to enhance the strike capability of the Indian military. BJP has continued to keep this agenda in mind, and resultantly, it is working in a multi-domain context. Let's look at just a glimpse on the posture side. While India often views China as its primary adversary, it is quite obvious that the poise of the bulk of its military is laid out against Pakistan. A safe estimate is 60-40, although in my the sense that I have is that it's even more. In any case, China has demonstrated a posture of restraint, thus the Indian capability is largely an overkill. And you heard in the keynote in the previous session a reference to it, but let me elaborate that. While India will continue to benefit from the American approach on being a counterweight to China, it's only a matter of time that when it thinks that it is that at that level, it will go on to confront United States in many ways, and those signals exist. And for those who might have seen this, there was a book that came out that said, India Checkmates America, and it was written by a former Indian Army Chief, General Padmanabhan. That might be the sense that existed and might be prevailing in this direction. Recalling India's failed attempt at an armed conflict in 2019, the Balakot Pulwama, one can see the extent of an intended escalation, going through various tiers, meeting the manifesto needs of the BJP, aggressive leadership signaling, Qatal ki Raat, the night of murder by the Prime Minister himself, using standoff weapons, a miserable diplomatic effort through a quick press release, though with its flawed assumptions, and when all that failed, persistently going up on the escalation ladder, threatening to use strategic missiles, then adding the sea domain. When none of this worked, it went on to conduct an anti-satellite test. So several domains, air, space, sea, cyber, repetitive disinformation, all tricks in the bag. And it served the BJP purpose domestically, as it won the domestic elections with a larger margin than what was expected. What remained unexpected was Pakistan's very measured actions in accordance with the Chapter 6 of the UN Charter to support peace and evade war. When it did not work, Pakistan exercised its inalienable right of self-defense as per the Article 51 of the UN Charter. Yet we applied the principle of proportionality despite all provocations. The rest, as they say, is history. I've argued elsewhere and would not hesitate to say this again, that the precarious state of stability in this region has thus far been only impeded by Pakistan from worsening. Peace, ladies and gentlemen, is hanging by a thread in South Asia, and Pakistan is firmly holding that thread. It is time that this is seen in good faith and supported, but on the flip side, let us come back to the realpolitik of it all. States tend to do all that they think they can. So the signal is, go fend for yourself, find your own solutions. And that is why, that is where I want to make a quick reference to the issue of technology. Very briefly, because the full session you have already heard and it has looked at those aspects. The determinants of modern day security environment has an essential element of aerospace technologies. I was struck by the reflection of the Chief of Air Staff yesterday on the impact of emerging technologies in the backdrop of quote-unquote omni-domain competition, which is complex and intense. And he termed it to be GPS, global in its scale, profound in its nature, and strategic in its effect, due to a simultaneous influence on the political, social, cultural, economic, and military domains. 2 points are relevant here, ladies and gentlemen. Some of the emerging technologies or the new technologies do not require a heavy industrial base. This implies that the developing world may also be able to partake in such developments. For example, artificial intelligence or disruptive technologies like 3D printing, for example. Let us also not forget that even in the US, several new technologies were initially supported by defense needs or initiated for defense needs, which later found immense civilian uses. Prominent among them was a cell phone, developed for the US Army, the microchip, as for the needs of the United States Air Force, for the F-15s and also for cruise missiles. GPS for the needs of the US Navy. And then you can think of the camera, so that you didn't need to bring in the data, transmit the data from satellites, and you could actually, instead of direct transmission, transfer the data. And of course, internet. So there are several examples. No wonder then that the military-industrial complex is destined to go the route of developing AI systems to meet the aerospace needs. The second point to note is that the new technologies research continues to expand, but the interest of the international community to work upon any regulatory or legal means is negligible to none. While there are noises about lethal autonomous weapons, not much progress is in the offing. This aspect also suggests you are on your own. And a few words on media, because that's a huge subject. Finally, the variety of the media aspects. Remember the Gulf War? There was a reference often given to the CNN effect, or the CNN factor. The synergy with the media became an essential need. So the militaries would go to war, taking the media along. Today, the use of media reporting is so vivid that it has led to a belief of every man has his own channel, because now you have social media. You could transmit from wherever, from your home, and go ahead and use it as, and say whatever, because you are invisible. You could use, there's so many bots and so many fake personalities. And then comes this other side of the media, the impact of the post-truth world. The post-truth in which you lie in so many times and so frequently that it becomes the truth. The Goebbels, Hitler's Goebbels kind of an approach, but done it to death now. Disinformation, fake news, almost believable deep fake. There are so many such areas. What is different this time is the nebulous nature of this situation. Who done it? Who is a friend and who is your enemy? What is the target? The laws of armed conflict will also very soon, if not already, would need more reflection and perhaps change, because it has become too complex. So what do we do? What can we do? I have some ideas here, and I'm going to not really go into them, but cherry pick and give you some thoughts that I think we need to focus on. While believing in not getting into an arms race, Pakistan has to ensure an effective capability to defense against any aggressive designs in this region. You did this in Balakot. You have the conference of Balakot 2.0, but futuristically, what else do you need to do? This is where an effective use of aerospace power becomes imperative. This is way beyond the first responder element. The air forces around the world work around speed, agility, synergy, integration, and simultaneity as part of their system thinking. And that's the system thinking that we need to go on. But here are a few thoughts on where we go from here. The domains of conflict have increased and now potentially includes everything and anything possible, and possibly everyone. If a conflict is thrust upon a state, the desire for a swift and painless war would always be there. But how can this desire be turned into a reality? Ukraine is too long already, for example. Since Pakistan's intent and direction in the context of manned air power is clearly manifested, I will focus on other aspects very quickly. First, investing in emerging technologies with outcomes. We heard about the internet and the possibility of disruption or disability of internet, but then you are going into the Internet of Things, and there are already ideas and practices of IOMT, the Internet of Military Things. Those are the directions that we need to think today for as near a future as perhaps 2050. Second, while involving the private sector would be imperative, the military-industrial complex has to lead the way. Militaries would have the funding to initiate projects, and if cell phone and camera and internet are an example to go by, the private sector will find uses, and those technologies can be suitably adjusted for use in the private sector. That's the technology control that one has to think about. Third, the speed with which decision making is to be done is increasing consistently. In fact, it has a tendency to rise to a level where the processing speed of the human brain may prove to be inadequate. This suggests a human-machine interface, and who better than the aerospace power handlers know this. Though there are challenges there too, but one thing is clear. The speed will be of essence in the future, including the mental agility required for prudent decision-making in a very quick time, in a real time-space relationship. The time and resources need to be invested in this domain like yesterday. Fourth, due to the varying nature of aerospace-related fuzzy domains like cyber or media element, the whole of nation approach is required in addition to the military element, including, for example, the media specialists, the diplomats, the IT experts, the lawfare experts, the technologists more importantly, and other scholars. This in turn needs a larger emphasis on synergy, because every institution or organization have a different culture. Synergy, especially in foreign policy, economic policy, and sustained funding for concurrent, for example, space projects. To do all that and more, using the speed of the algorithm interface with the human brain would be imperative for future conflicts. The challenge, of course, is time for setting up research outfits, looking into the future, for developing solutions while tackling the evolving human-machine interface challenges. We heard yesterday about the PF's initiative on our National Aerospace Technology Park. Several of these things that I'm saying might be happening. With the domain of aerospace being so multi-domain, one would be keen to know what initiatives are in the offing and when would the details and the timelines would start to appear. The devil, as they say, in this detail. I thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I invite our last speaker of the GSTAR 2022, let me make a statement. And I'm doing so to actually generate a debate that may continue even after GSTAR 2022 is over. The world is nearing World War 2.5. Why do I say 2.5? Because nearly half of the world is at war, either directly or indirectly. Kashmir, Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, and now in Europe. Almost whole of Europe is supporting Ukraine against Russia. So nearly half the world's population, whereas this century is only 22 years old. We have to remember this. This century is only 22 years old, and starting from Gulf War II, Afghan War II, and all those wars that I have mentioned. So just think over it, where we are heading, and last 2 days we have already heard that space is already weaponized, although it may not have been declared. And secondly, my argument is to concentrate on the statement of, perhaps at this time, the sole superpower, US President Biden, in last 2 weeks, two very significant and both are very dangerous statements. One, that world is very close to nuclear situation of Cuban Missile Crisis. He said so on the statement of President Putin. Second, the Pakistan is the most dangerous country with an incoherent nuclear program. Very unfortunate statement from an ally whom Pakistan has all the way supported ever since our independence from Sito and Cento till the global war on terror. But the statement has come. So just think over it, and now permit me to invite our last worthy speaker, Air Commodore Dr. Liaqatullah Iqbal, who is a CPD and CEO of National Aerospace Science and Technology Park. His bio is shown. However, the important point I would like to answer is that for the last 5 years, he is looking after the NASTAP, and whatever NASTAP is today is all his effort under the guidance of the Air Headquarters and the successive chiefs of air staffs. He is also a recipient of Sitare Imtiaz Military. Doctor, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, sir. Kindly presentation lagani. Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable Air Chief Marshal Tahir Rafiq Bhatt, Sir Dr. Shamsi, distinguished guests, dignitaries, excellencies, Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. Thank you very much for sparing your time for this presentation, which is very close to my heart, extremely close to the heart of the Honorable Chief of GSTAR, and inshallah, after my presentation, will become very close to your hearts as well. I will proceed in a very simple sequence as flashed on the screen. I will take you through the journey of the background of this project, what was the vision, what is the vision today, how we are unfolding this project, and how we are moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the national security and sovereignty are dependent on the well-being of a nation, whereas well-being of a nation is in turn related to the national economy. And technological supremacy ultimately paves the way for national economies, especially in the era of information age, robotics, and automation. COVID-19 pandemic and the climate change have not only further validated the importance of technological edge in national well-being, but they have actually proved that the very survival of the nations will depend on the investment in the technologies that nation decides to make. Therefore, the technological advancements will lead to economies, social and well-being, and ultimately the national security as well as sovereignty. Fortunately, Pakistan this year unrolled its first ever national security policy, which makes the well-being of its citizens at the heart of national security. And that's where I will take this presentation from. Ladies and gentlemen, if we look at the 75 years evolution of technologies, it's really mind-boggling that from how a primitive living that we used to have as to what kind of landscape we are living in, you just see the journey from the lantern and lamps to the oxen to the robotics in precision agriculture and so on and so forth. However, unfortunately, we humans are very good in using the same very technologies for our destruction, and we have done quite a bit in the past. So, talking specifically of the aerospace industry, ladies and gentlemen, within the broad ambit of industries and technologies, the aerospace industry stands out as the strategic industry for very well-founded reasons, few of which I will highlight. The aerospace industry is technology, capital, and labor-intensive. So it is a prestigious entry into this club, and it is made limited and jealously guarded. It is one of the largest contributors to the national economy if you look at the numbers. It drives research, design, and innovation in every domain of engineering and sciences. And it is being extremely R&D intensive and relevant to the national security and sovereignty. Aerospace industry can catalyze the most important segment of the society, which is academia, intellectuals, and think tanks. Aerospace industry has also proven very resilient based on, ladies and gentlemen, last 75 years of data. On this chart, you will see the 72 years between 1944 to 2016. And you can see the pandemics, or wars, or the 9/11, all those things caused little dips in the industry, but it picked up very fast. And all the numbers are now indicating that post-pandemic, we have fully recovered or almost recovered from the effect of COVID-19. Another very interesting fact is that in the aerospace industry is the very source of destruction and could be very big source of, you can say, saving lives and recreating the humanity. We can annihilate the world or we can save the world with the same technologies. Believe me, at the heart of the technologies, there is no difference. It is a robot, it's a microcontroller, there is a technology, there is manufacturing, there are computers, software, same. Another important factor was highlighted by honorable speaker before me, Sir Banuri, that there are so many spin-offs. There is a 200 pages journal published every year by NASA, which focuses on those technologies which were funded by the defense agencies but ended up into commercialization and to general public use. So there's great potential. You look at the numbers, they're mind-boggling. There is more than $10 trillion US market for next 20 years for the aviation industry. There is $1 trillion US market expected to be by 2040 for the aerospace, for space industry. And look at the other numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, a $50 trillion US market for next 10 to 20 years. It's really mind-boggling. So my statement over here is that these numbers and forecast only indicate how bright the future would be if we join our hands, and how destructive the future would be if we do not join our hands. So ladies and gentlemen, with this preamble of the technology, its prolific impacts, its destructiveness versus its constructiveness, all those things that I have mentioned, the Pakistan deserves more, and that is why we have embarked upon this national project called National Aerospace Science and Technology Park. NASTEP is approved by the government of Pakistan as a project of strategic national importance, and it has to be spearheaded by the Pakistan Air Force because of the competence, because of the human resource available within Pakistan Air Force to handle this project intelligently. Ladies and gentlemen, our vision for NASTEP derives from the vision from the Honorable Chief of the Air Staff is to become one of the best aerospace clusters, aerospace, cyber and IT cluster in the world, with the design and R&D innovation centers for engineering and disruptive technologies. There was a great moment for NASTEP team yesterday to have heard the Honorable Chief of the Air Staff formally launch this project from this platform, and this has become a knowledge to the country, as a gift to the country, inshallah. And as I will present to you some of the facts today, you will appreciate the effort that has gone in has already started to pay its dividends. Ladies and gentlemen, I also would like to explain that the NASTEP is planned at 4 levels. There is the mothership, the main project, which will be the aerospace cluster of Pakistan. It is being established at Kamra. This is one major mother of the entire project. Then there are babies. Babies are being born in major cities of the country like Rawalpindi, Karachi and Lahore. These will be the technoparks as nurseries for human resource development and feeding back to the mother. Then the third level is the university technoparks. We have already identified 7 universities, including the 4 campuses of the Air University, which is a signature project of Pakistan Air Force, and some other lead universities of the country to establish technoparks on priority. Last but not the least are the small software technology parks, which is the initiative of Pakistan Software Export Board, where we take small infrastructure and convert it into a software technology park. So these all 4 levels we are targeting under the platform umbrella of NASTEP. This slide will give you an overview of the mothership, which is the NASTEP Aerospace Cluster at Kamra. It has 6 components. It includes the Pakistan Aeronautical Complex. It includes Pakistan Air Force Base Minhas, the Aviation Aerospace Campus of Air University, NASTEP Kamra, and an industrial zone for the private sector. This will be coming together in about a year's time, and we intend to inaugurate it next year, inshallah. And this will give us the all-encompassing ecosystem which is required for design and development. Next level are the very well-designed technoparks for the human resource development, for the technologies development, with the design centers, labs that can provide an environment where we can take multidisciplinary research and development. These technoparks, ladies and gentlemen, have been master planned with the help of very capable human resource Pakistan Air Force has, who have studied in various best of the universities of the world and have worked in the research centers along with the co-opted members from the national landscape. These university campuses are not new to us. As far as the world is concerned, the entire Silicon Valley emanated from a single technopark called SRP, Stanford Research Park, 1951. My dear respected audience, just one technopark ensured what is Silicon Valley. Now, this is well understood phenomena worldwide. Almost any good university has a technopark. Inshallah, we are embarking upon this, and you will see that one after the other, our institutions will have their technology parks with incubation centers, companies sitting there, working together, bridging the gap between academia and industry, and that is what is in the making in the university technoparks. Last but not least, as I mentioned, we identify in small cities some infrastructure, refurbish it, give high-speed internet, and bring in the talent from the local areas and help them grow in the IT industry. And there have been lots and lots of success stories as shared by the Ministry of IT. So with this scheme, inshallah, over next 2 years time frame, we intend to bring in more than 10 technoparks at the national, regional, university, and the cities level. And this is what is commitment, inshallah, with our country, and we are well on our way to do that, inshallah. And ladies and gentlemen, let me also submit that this is not what I'm saying was in air. We have done our homework. We have been working day and night. And this what is flashed in front of you is the 24 volumes concept, technology development roadmap, and procedures manual document set. These 24 volumes were not written overnight. It took us more than a year, more than 30 PhDs, and cooperative members from the national landscape, and we have written everything down as how we are going to take this project forward. Based on the homework, we raised a PC1 for approval from the Public Sector Development Program. Our PC1 was branded as the best PC1 ever in the history of the country. And from the platform of CWP, it was announced that we wish that our PC1 could be used as a template for all the development projects for the country. So it is the homework that has gone into this project. And the Honorable Chief of the GSTAF, having the responsibility from the government of Pakistan, does not spare a day and night to lead us from the front, give us all the support, and give us all the guidance. That makes a lot of difference. So now I will come to the final part of my presentation, which is the next step rollout plan. You'll be interested in knowing, okay, you have done the homework, you have talked about the technologies, now what's next? And I will give you an overview of where we are today. I will give you a video clip from the first launch of our Next Step Technology Park, which has already been launched in Rawalpindi. And this is the voice message by the Honorable Chief of the GSTAR. Okay. आवाज देखिएगा, please.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome all the participants on the occasion of first ever open house ceremony of Alpha Technoscare of National Aerospace Science and Technology Park, Rawalpindi. And I appreciate your participation in this historic event. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, this initiative is a major step forward on the path of self-reliance. I am sure that our shared effort will strengthen the local industry and attract, inshallah, the foreign investment also. No doubt, our aim is to work together for national cause and contribute accordingly to this effort of self-reliance. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan Air Force has embarked upon various national building efforts, predominantly in aerospace domain. Pakistan Air Force vision of self-reliance, ladies and gentlemen, is derived from the strategic direction given by the father of the nation, Quaid-e-Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And I also like to mention here our successive generation of Pakistan Air Force leadership has focused on modernization campaign through self-reliance parameters to strengthen and enhance the PF operational capabilities. PF has established National Aeroscience and Technology Park, Aviation City, Pakistan, to target entire value chain of aerospace system, certified products such as aircraft, UAV, robotic, algorithm, simulator, cyber, etc., and many more to come. In addition, right from the concept phase, National Aerospace Science and Technology Park, Aviation City, Pakistan, consortium were formed to bring in best professionals from aviation, IT, cyber, academia, urban planning, corporate law, finance, and private sector, alongside key officials from Board of Investment and confirmed ministry. This joint effort resulted in formulation of, ladies and gentlemen, the concept document, and the project was later declared as project of strategic national importance by the government of Pakistan, spearheaded by Pakistan Air Force. Subsequently, after the approval of Planning Commission, Aerospace Design and Innovation Center, commonly known as ADIC, was established, which include projects like Precision Agriculture, National Incubation Center, and Center of Excellence for Key Technologies. The magnitude and diversity of this project of national significance is, ladies and gentlemen, unprecedented in the history of Pakistan Air Force. National Aerospace Science and Technology Park holds developing prospect for investment from both inland and abroad, with participation of international or the local firms and the dignitaries. Let me share that the several technology cluster and technopark have been planned at national, regional, universities, cities level very recently. Ladies and gentlemen, the inauguration of NASTAP Rawalpindi will be planned next month with the participation of definitely with the national leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, this project is very dear to my heart. A lot of effort has gone into deliberating and defining its contours and leading to a success story. My team would brief you further details of the project today and show you around Alpha Technosquare, which is dedicated to private sector company, presented by all of you. I commend all the stakeholders for their endeavors in successful conduct of this event. I thank you for you, ladies and gentlemen, your presence, and assure you that the Pakistan Air Force all out sports as a partner in the national cause would continue. Pakistan Air Force Zindabad, Pakistan Paindabad.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, with this leadership and this support, we have come long ways. Just within 2 months, alhamdulillah, after this open house, NASTAP Alpha at Rawalpindi is fully operational. These are some of the more glimpses from the event. There was a panel discussion where we had members from the Pakistan Software Export Board, Ministry of IT, Pasha, private sector. The event was very well taken by the private sector, which is core for our project. There's some of more glimpses. Some of the pictures again from the open house, from the visits, from various facilities within the park. And this, ladies and gentlemen, gives you the overall overview of the project of the NASTAP Alpha, which is Operation Rawalpindi. These various buildings that you see are numbered. For example, Alpha 3 is the Radar Design and Development Center. This is an iconic Welcome and Expo Center. Alpha 7 is our Aircraft and Drones Design and Development Center. And Alpha 6 is for space labs and some other systems. Ever since we launched this project for the last 2 months, we have seen great success, ladies and gentlemen. We had only 60,000 square feet to offer, and we were requested 350,000 square feet from the private sector. Within just 2 months of time, more than 50 companies have contracted, and more than 20 have already started to operate. So this has been a great success. We have also brought in the co-spaces, the co-working spaces brand called Daftar Khan, which is developing another 40,000 square feet for the small teams, startups, and SMEs. This is some of the glimpses from the Daftar Khan, how they shape up the interiors. Another highlight of the NASTAP Alpha at Rawalpindi is that first ever National Incubation Center for Aerospace Technologies is being established with a consortium of private sector and Ministry of IT. And we're also establishing a cyber and IT related incubation center with the Turkish collaboration, which has already become operationalized at NASTAP Alpha. This will give you the glimpse of the environment which is being created within the Cyber COSA, which is the brand name of our cyber and IT related incubation center, to basically tickle the entrepreneurial minds of the youth. As far as the overall ecosystem is concerned, ladies and gentlemen, at NASTAP Alpha, If you look at the existing elements which are already there, are in the near vicinity, those are highlighted over here in terms of institutions, various PF design and development centers, etc. This is the core of NASTEP Alpha. We are integrating them in the first step. In the next step, what we're going to do is we are going to link the NASTEP Alpha, the Rawalpindi Park, with the national level. And in third phase, we are going to link it with the international institutions, companies, and industries. So this is how we are going to build from one park to the other and creating a local ecosystem at national level and international level and connecting our parks together. This is the second park, ladies and gentlemen. It's being established at Karachi. As I speak, the open house of this techno park is already taking place in Karachi today, and I will show you the glimpses from that in a minute. 2/3 of this techno park has been allocated for the private companies. So this is the venue of the open house, which is actually happening today, and probably some of the pictures will be coming out tonight, inshallah. The third techno park in sequence is the NASTEP Lahore, which will be an IT park and an institute, which will be inshallah operational by 23rd March. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, we will be able to operationalize our 3 of the regional techno parks within 6 months' time, inshallah, learn from each other, learn from private sector, learn from the colleagues like yourself, and apply course correction and move forward, inshallah. And then next year, inshallah, August 14, we'll go back to the mothership, the CAMRA, the NASTEP Aerospace Cluster. We have defined the scope of phase 1, and in this phase 1, the biggest highlight is what the Honorable Chief of the Staff also mentions, called the Aerospace Design and Innovation Center, and I'll give you an overview of that building. This building, ladies and gentlemen, has more than 10 design centers and labs, more than 25 labs, and 500,000 square feet. This is our strategic asset. This building alone can have more than 2,000 design specialists under one roof, with all the facilities and 10 design centers. We intend to connect this with all our research centers, labs, technoparks within country, and with our strategic partners. And this video will give you an overview of what is inside. Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, these assets that we are creating, they have been planned to have technology centers and designs for these various aerospace systems, cyber and IT related systems and technologies. And of course, these systems, these technologies and these centers require sustainability, so we are targeting some of the major businesses also through this project. So you must be asking this question, which is a very legitimate one, and I asked on your behalf from myself, what assurance can I give you that this project will be really a success? And ladies and gentlemen, it's not a talk. It is what we have already, alhamdulillah, demonstrated, and what we are building on. I will share with you very quickly. First and foremost, you all sitting in this hall under the age of 29. This country is blessed with 140 million young people under the age of 29. Which of the country in the world can boast that much of a strength? So our people our young boys and girls are our real strength, and this project is all about young people. Second strength that we are banking upon is that we are not talking in the air, we're talking about a 50 years of legacy that has been created by our predecessors, by elders sitting over here, sitting in this hall. We are proud to have them here. They have given us the capabilities of 50 years of engineering core that is available to build inside NASTAP. That is our strength. Of course, there have been, besides aeronautical complex, we have the aero engineering depots, the research centers that Pakistan Air Force has organically grown over the last 50, 60 years. One of the depots, number 102 depot, was established in 1923, more than 120 years of legacy. So that is the strength I'm talking about. And of course, these different work centers have been working with the private sector, and vendor relationship has been established, so private sector is there. And finally, the NASTAP technology development roadmap that we have put together for 10 years that builds on all these strengths systematically and chronologically, as I mentioned already. The third pillar of this success that we are looking upon is that we have done away with the bureaucratic problems. Usually our private sector cannot grow because of bureaucratic hurdles. That is why this project was declared as a strategic national importance project. It paves the way for all the government-to-government relationship with the international countries, and we have a corporate face for this project that enables us to interact with local private sector, international companies, and that is why it is written CEO for my name. I have been the honor to have the CEO for this project for last 4 years, and we have, alhamdulillah, today completed the 4th audit by KPMG. The 4th pillar of this success that we are talking about is the international collaborations. Our project is predominantly part of any major strategic economic framework that exists between major countries, and we're looking forward to basically work with our international partners. So ladies and gentlemen, to conclude my presentation, first and foremost, I must say that we have come full circle. We have been able to go through all the stages, and now we are able to put our hands on integration, rollout, and operationalization, as well as consolidation. Our project has entered a well-defined rollout stage, and the RESTAP rollout plan has already received overwhelming response, as I have mentioned. More than 50 companies have registered, more companies want to come, and we actually have lesser space available than what is required. NASTAP annual plan has been formalized and is well underway to inshallah roll out 10 technoparks at 4 levels that I've already mentioned. And NASTAP is well poised for national and international collaborations because all the frameworks at the government and business to business, cluster to cluster level exist for doing that. So way forward for us is that we will inshallah leverage NASTAP identities to create maximum value for the country, industry, national populace, and the institutions. We will build our ecosystem, linkages, and JVs and partnerships. We will manifest the triple helix model in the truest sense, and will promote startups and SMEs through our technoparks. And finally, we will build the partnerships. We will grow our private sector. Our motto is public sector-led, private sector growth, and inshallah we will become the engine of growth for the aerospace, cyber, and IT industry for the country. So ladies and gentlemen, in the end, my request to all of you is that let's work together, build together, and grow together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liaquat, for a very, very comprehensive discourse on this new and national and the project of national importance. Ladies and gentlemen, our worthy speakers online, they are still holding on and waiting for your questions. I will take the questions one by one. I'll request the worthy audience to raise hand, introduce yourself, be brief as far as the question is concerned, preferably without a preamble. Thank you very much. Yes, please. Go ahead.
It's not working. Assalamualaikum, sir. I am here from Defense and Strategic Study Department, Kazakhstan University. Sir, my first question is.
जी काइंडली अपना नाम बताइए, इंस्टीट्यूशन बेशक ना बताएं.
Space powers like India and other big space powers are testing ASAT weapons, which can be a serious cause of traditional and non-traditional threats like debris in outer space. Is there any cooperation among major space powers to stop and control this type of rising traditional and non-traditional threat? And my last question is, BCAP agreement between US and India is providing real-time access of geospatial data to India. How it can be a serious threat for strategic stability of South Asia, and what are countermeasures of Pakistan? Thank you very much.
Okay, for that question I'll request Dr. Sannia and Air Commodore Banuri to answer, please, one by one. Dr. Sannia, are you there?
Yes, Dr. Shamsi. Can you please repeat the question?
I think his question is related to the developments in South Asia as far as the aerospace power is concerned. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a very broad question as far as the space developments are concerned. I would say that, again, as is rightly pointed out in the previous presentation, Pakistan is making a good headway towards developing its space capabilities and technology and space centers. As far as India is concerned, India is kind of quite far from Pakistan. The reason is that India has launched already its satellites, number of satellites into the space. And they're also going to launch their spacecraft soon. So if you're keeping a pace with India, Pakistan is kind of far behind from that. Well, again, what has been discussed, what is Pakistan's objective right now? Are we looking for a neck-to-neck competition with India, which is clearly not the approach that Pakistan is looking forward. It's more defensive approach, and Pakistan is having a joint cooperation with China. I think Damon and I have really chalked out in our presentation that probably for Pakistan's economic and space capabilities that are right now in the situation, it would be better that Pakistan, instead of making clear combination of hybrid, would go for more strategic approach and use asymmetric combination to compete with India for its defense capabilities. I can just briefly discuss in that, because what you have asked is a broad thesis for answering the question, if I have answered some of it.
Thank you. Khalid.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have understood the whole scope of your question, but if it is indeed about the developments in aerospace in South Asia, here's my take on this. The classic use of air power has expanded into not only its own domains, the kinetic and non-kinetic, but also gone into other domains which use aerospace or other facilities, including the cyber, to expand this canvas to what the air forces traditionally do, but also beyond its remit. And that's what I meant when I referred to the need for a whole of the nation approach in this context, which means there are specializations elsewhere also, for which several entities within countries, Pakistan, I'm taking Pakistan as an example, need to synergize and integrate. So the buzzword here will be integration in this context. But if you have a different context, feel free to ask me again.
Can I have the next question, please? The last one, I think he raised the hand before the lady. We'll come back to you, madam.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I'm Ali Jaber, defense journalist from APP. Sir, I had a question about NESTAP. What is the vision behind NESTAP? Will it work as a focal point for Pakistan, or will it be extended as a regional hub or focal point for cyberspace and aerospace research and development initiatives? Kindly elaborate. Thank you.
Dr. Liaquat, please.
Yes, sir. Well, as far as the NESTAP vision is concerned, it is predominantly to cater for the technology needs of the Pakistan Air Force, tri-services, and at a national level in the cyber, IT, and air and space domains, all domains. So it is Pakistan-centric as far as the technology is concerned in first order of business. However, when you create technoparks, they are known to be international entities. They cannot operate in isolation. They are actually tools of creating ecosystems which only benefit at national and international level if integrated thoroughly. That is why we have a vision that while remaining alive to the basic purpose of creation of these technoparks, of spending money from national exchequer in the beginning, the long-term goal is that we connect with the international global value chain of all these three industries and accrue maximum benefit. For that, the step forward would be to enable our private sector to grow with us through these technoparks so that they are able to capture the business internationally also. So that is why, while remaining Pakistan-centric, this will be an international collaboration platform.
Can I just take the liberty to add that this kind of, the notion of the science and technology parks is everywhere. There's also this competition that happens between science and technology parks across the world, and countries develop their own capabilities and also get an opportunity to interact with other nations in their similar expertise to review or to understand what the other developments are. So if you look at in the context of the science and technology in airspace is growing with a lot of integration with other disciplines, this is an opportunity which is going to be different because this, as I understand, is the only aerospace and technology park is the only one here. So there will be opportunities not only to collaborate with others, propagate what you want to do, and also understand where the rest of the world is going to in this direction. Thank you.
Hello?
Okay, so this is Dr. Aisha Nazuk from Nash University. I have a very crisp and compact question, and it goes like that. In the event of technology-related crimes, how can we define the jurisdiction spaces? For example, if a weapon developed by, let's say, Russia, it happens in the territory of USA and it damages, let's say, Germany, who will be accountable in the end? And how will the global administrative law respond to such type of crimes?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll request Professor James Wirtz to answer this question. James, are you there?
It's an interesting question. And so it really talking about liability for weapons use. You know, I think usually it's the entity that employs the weapon that's actually liable for the damage, not necessarily the creator or the inventor of the weapon. So, but you know, this is a question for international lawyers, and that's it's beyond my capability to answer.
Thank you. And I will also request Dr. Damon Coletta to answer this question, if you have any take on this.
As Professor Wirtz said, it's a difficult question. I would probably go toward the liability conventions for space, because the founders of space strategy and and the folks who were dreaming ahead towards space industry did consider that there would be this problem for allocating liability. So the difficulty that you both are referring to is exacerbated by dual use technologies. So Starlink, for example, from SpaceX, can be used for commercial purposes to gain profit in world markets, but then as a conflict develops, it can be used for military strategic purposes as well. So does Starlink, at what point does Starlink become a legitimate target in war? And I think we're not going to be able to answer that question today. The professor is obviously working in a intriguing field. I think there's much to be written about that. I think the best we can do is to say it's going to start with those liability conventions. And it does raise the question by your final speaker on the national technology parks about what the proper role is and what the proper relationship is between the state and its commercial entities.
Thank you. Thank you. Shaun, are you there? What is your take on this?
Thank you, Shamsi. I'd love to contribute, but I can't add anything to what's already been said. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Any question? Sir, मैं आपको बाद में दोबारा ले लेता. Anybody else? Please go ahead, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Air Commodore retired Nadeem Jafri. It's a very good initiative of a National Aerospace Technology Park being taken by the Pakistan Air Force. I just want to know that is it being taken at a government level, because these are the areas which are specific to the aerospace area. The rest of the areas are also being catered by the government or not? Thank you.
Sir, थोड़ा सा दोबारा repeat कीजिएगा. I missed the part of question.
Achha, I have monitored that question. You see, is it owned by the government? It is supported by the government?
Yes. Sir, I have been given the question. I will answer that, please. Sir, this is...
Please, I will repeat it again. The area which you have catered is for the aerospace. National aerospace area has been tackled, and you have taken 3 areas: cyber, IT, and one more, aerospace. So, other than these areas, is government at a national level looking after the areas which have not been taken by you? So this is my basic question, because technology park is specific now at this moment. I wanted that it should be the government should take all other areas which are not being catered by your organization.
Sir, primarily this project was conceived by the Pakistan Air Force. This project has been conceived by the Pakistan Air Force leadership based on the capabilities that we developed. Then we went to the government of Pakistan. Whatever we have in public sector ultimately belongs to the government of Pakistan. So we presented our capabilities. We presented the capabilities that could be commercialized. So that is one aspect of the project. Then the capability that we need for the future, the technologies, the way they are shaping up, not only the price would be a question, but the very technology reliability. You get an aircraft today, it's a flying computer. You bought it, you had the money for it, but then you use it in the act of war, in the time of war, somebody could shut it down. So we explained these needs and these opportunities to the government of Pakistan. So government of Pakistan gave us a patronage. This was approved as a national project of strategic national importance on May 14, 2018. And this has been led by the Honorable Chief of the Air Staff ever since, and now it has taken the impetus. So overall, you can say the ownership of this project is with the government of Pakistan. It will be spearheaded by Pakistan Air Force forever, and it is including the IT and cyber-related industries. As we have been discussing through these forums, there is no border between an aerospace, cyber, and IT. It is one space. It is one continuum that you have to safeguard to get the national security. So that is why You call it cyber, you call it IT, you call it aerospace. Whatever name you give, at the end of the day, that's why I specifically chose the title of my talk. It was technologies and systems and technologies. I didn't mention aerospace, I didn't mention cyber. So it is generic. Now we know that we have to develop all technologies, they are interrelated. So having gone through this phase in which government has supported, this project will eventually enable the private sector to grow further.
I wanted to come back on the earlier question on this issue of how attribution about any attacks. There are, and I briefly referred to it in my presentation, there are laws of arms conflict which deal with the conduct of war and how to deal with those issues. The gap is that these laws called the 4 Geneva Conventions which deal with how to conduct war while you have gone to war, how to deal with this, are now coming up to become inadequate because of the advent of the newer technologies for which weren't really conceivable at that time when these laws were made. So there is, my quick reference was that it is becoming complicated to apply those laws. Attribution will always be difficult in any case, but if you're going to look at international law, I happen to teach a course on use of force and international law. These are the areas where fuzziness exists. And when you bring it to the laws like the situations like machine learning and artificial intelligence, there is not much impetus around the world to even think of making laws. So these gaps will exist for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can I have the second last question? Yes, please. Ji sir, wo last question.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Masood Chaudhary, journalist. Sir, will there be the role of CAS in tech parks, developments, other projects? And contrary to that, brilliant research papers I have seen from CAS researchers, will they see daylight in related to technology parks? Thank you.
So the question is related to CAS, so let me answer myself. CAS, since its establishment only 3.5 years ago, is working on very diverse subjects. Aerospace and security being the core, it is doing research on multiple aspects, multiple subjects. And alhamdulillah, it was within 2 years accepted as on the advisory board of National Security Division also, NSD. CAS researchers are busy round the clock and working on topics that they themselves select right in the beginning of the year, and then they work throughout the year to produce these wonderful papers which were there on the stall. CAS, under the leadership of the Air Force, number one, and then the CAS president has a vision that CAS must become a center of excellence in research and development of aerospace and security studies. And that is what we are doing so. And the organization of GSTAR 22 is a manifestation of our hard work and focus that the CAS has towards these studies. And inshallah, we will continue and you will definitely see the light of the day. CAS journal is already released, the first journal, which is known as JAS, Journal of CAS. And it carries, I think, some very important articles on diverse subjects, including at least 5 book reviews also done by our CAS researchers. Thank you. So we have the last question.
Sir, if I may add to this.
Ji.
I would like to add to this answer, please. Since we were busy establishing the National Aerospace Science and Technology Park. Technology Park के project पे हम काम कर रहे थे. So it was taking us this time to get physical shape. Now our first project has rolled out in Rawalpindi. Next, as I mentioned, in being done in Karachi. We have to do our part also. Now we are taking CAS, located in Rawalpindi Techno Park, as our think tank and policy institute. So this will get impetus. The park will get impetus from the CAS, and CAS will get impetus from the NASTAP. So this will, inshallah, see more light of the day, inshallah, very soon.
Can I have the last question? Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shafkat. I am MPhil Scholar of International Relations from
Please
Islamic.
keep the mic close to you. यहाँ तक फिर आवाज नहीं पहुँचती.
My name is Shafkat. I am MPhil Scholar of International Relations from Islamic University. So, Indian modernization in aerospace technology. So, India using different aircraft like Make series and Rafale. So Pakistan using the aircraft like JF-70 Tender, and important aircraft with F-16 Tender, F-16 aircraft. This is the backbone of the Pakistan Air Force. So my question is that we have an issue with the F-16 Tender. Which issue I mentioned it? Okay, we have a using F-16 the old version. Second, it's the limitation stock of the aircraft. Third is a maintenance issue. So India can buy any aircraft from any world, from any country. So my question is that what is the option for Pakistan to maintain balance in South Asia? Or second मेरा question ये है कि why we ignore the Pakistan Air Force? Always Pakistan ignore the Pakistan Air Force. अभी हम क्यों जागे हैं Air Force को जो उनको मॉडर्नाइजेशन करने के लिए दुनिया तो पता नहीं किधर एयरफोर्स उन्होंने अपनी स्ट्रॉन्ग बना ली है. थैंक यू सर.
Thank you. Since this is an out of course question, so I will answer it myself. Air Force सोई हुई नहीं थी और ये भी नहीं है कि Air Force अभी जागी है. Let me tell you, Air Force ever since Pakistan Air Force ever since its इंसेप्शन ये इंडियन एयरफोर्स का ड्रीम है कि वो किसी तरह पाकिस्तान एयरफोर्स को नीचा दिखा दे, और वो खुदा न ख्वास्ता आज तक नहीं कर सके हैं वो. ठीक है? Why do I say this? Just remember these 5 letters of English. PLSTT, that is Pakistan जो PSL है, PSLTT T20. PAF is thriving, alhamdulillah, on these letters. That is passion. Passion of each worker of Pakistan Air Force. L stands for the leadership. Pakistan Air Force's successive leaderships have proved that they are far superior in the mind game against any IAF chief that has lived their life as Chief of Air Staff in the Indian Armed Forces, Indian Air Force. Number 3, S stands for strategy. Pakistan Air Force has always beaten Indian Air Force because of a superior strategic orientation, either on the battlefield itself, in the aerial engagement, or on ground. And the 2 T's, that is training and teamwork. Otherwise, if you start counting the equipment, Indian Air Force has always had more equipment and superior equipment. But it is Pakistan Air Force that has been able to beat Indian Air Force at all levels only because of these 5 letters. Okay? So rest assured, your Air Force is awake and it is the pride of nation. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, with the permission of Air Chief Marshal, sir, may I close the session? Thank you very much for this relatively longer session. And let me once again thank my online speakers, Shaun Clarke from New Zealand, Professor James Wirtz from USA, Dr. Damon Coletta from USA, Dr. Sannia Abdullah from USA, Air Commodore Khalid Banuri from Pakistan, and Air Commodore Dr. Liaqat from Pakistan. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Ziaul Haq Shamsi. Now I would like to invite President CAS Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan to present mementos to distinguished chief guests and panelists of session 4. First, I would like to invite Air Chief Marshal Tahir Rafiq Bhatt. Please receive your memento from President CAS. Now I would like to invite Air Commodore Khalid Banuri. And now Air Commodore Dr. Liaqatullah Iqbal. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to an end of brief presentation ceremony of session 4. Please be seated. We will commence our closing session soon. Ladies and gentlemen, the guest of honor for closing session of GSTAR 2022 is Vice Chief of Air Staff, Pakistan Air Force, Air Marshal Mohammad Zahid Mahmood, Hilal-e-Imtiaz Military. Now I would like to request our worthy chief guest, Air Marshal Mohammad Zahid Mahmood, Hilal-e-Imtiaz Military, to please come on the stage to deliver his address.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Former Chief of Air Staff, colleagues, veterans, distinguished guests from Pakistan and abroad, President CAS, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. For me, it is indeed a pleasure to be here at the concluding session of the Conference on Global Strategic Threat and Response 2022. At the onset, I must felicitate CAS and its team for organizing this event, that too at an extremely crucial time. International political and strategic scenario has never been so complex and uncertain. As a war rages on in Europe, this war must not be seen in the European context only. It has demonstrated impact over extended geographical boundaries as far as various shades of human security are concerned. This includes food security in many South Asian countries, Middle East and African countries. Energy and food prices remain high as Russia's war in Ukraine drags towards the end of 8 months. With increased pressure from supply chain disruptions and much reduced production due to climate change and energy security. Within our region, the situation in Afghanistan remains uncertain and warrants
immediate world attention to avert an even worse humanitarian disaster. While global players do have concerns about the Taliban's government's treatment of women and education, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that basic humanitarian needs are met in a timely manner. At our end, following our great Qaid's vision of peace within and peace without, Pakistan intends to resolve all its disputes, including that of Jammu and Kashmir, on the basis of long outstanding UN resolutions. Rivalry between India and Pakistan has been the central cause of poverty, hunger, and lack of human security in South Asia. Human security in its entirety cannot be ensured without focusing on the well-being of people, because an economy which does not care for the majority of its population cannot sustain or grow. Pakistan's relevance due to its strategic location cannot be overemphasized. Various infrastructure projects under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor are expected to provide better means of communication between major regional countries throughout the length and breadth of Pakistan into China, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. However, successful execution of this plan would largely depend on peace and stability in Afghanistan, for which Pakistan is working relentlessly with major stakeholders within the region and beyond. The proceedings of GSTAR 2022 have shown us that geoeconomics occupy a pivotal position in the geostrategic calculus of all major state and even non-state actors. There are nations which are favorably disposed towards the pragmatic of development-driven and interconnected geoeconomics, but there are also nations whose national security calculus has overridden mutual economic gains and have instead reverted to a mercantilist and zero-sum paradigm. The world will benefit from a wider interchange of ideas, people, goods, and services. GSTAR 2022 has helped to uncover many of these nuances that lie within the wide scope of geoeconomics. Ladies and gentlemen, technological progress is an assured way towards economic growth and development of a country. History has never witnessed the impact of technologies on all aspects of human life, as is being witnessed with emerging technologies such as AI, cyber, robotics, biotechnologies, and 3D printing, etc. While these technologies are extremely helpful in all fields of modern life, they have also created new vulnerabilities, threatening everyday work as well as peaceful coexistence. Being dual-use, emerging technologies have also military applications. This is reshaping modern warfighting techniques as well as bringing about strategic and doctrinal shifts. Since these technologies are developing at a much faster pace as compared to formulation of rules to govern their use, this leaves a huge gap in a state's ability to steer and monitor their applications. Legality and ethical aspects of utilization of certain technologies remains unanswered. This is likely to impact the existing value system and framework on which the existing social system and international order is based. I believe there was a specific question also asked on this aspect. Owing to their military applications, the race for technology acquisition and supremacy is changing from competition to rivalries. Selective sharing of these technologies, especially in a conflict-prone region such as South Asia, is leading towards strategic instability. With their kinetic and non-kinetic disruptive capabilities, convergence of these technologies will create serious challenges. My take is, for it all to work, we have to work towards peaceful use of these technologies for betterment of humanity and formulate rules at an international framework for their military applications. Ladies and gentlemen, common and shared concerns of militarization of space are not unfounded. The dual-use technological evolutions have been extremely worrisome, particularly in the developing world, primarily due to lack of space knowledge and capacity to deal with catastrophic consequences of its potential weaponization and subsequent fallout. Unfortunately, international organizations responsible to ensure peace and stability across the globe do not have the wherewithal to counter the fast-paced technological developments in space, primarily because the present international system does not have the power to block any state from using space for military purposes. Space warfare at this time may be a theoretical debate, but it may soon become a reality. The establishment of space commands by major world powers and testing of anti-satellite weapons are indicative of the intent of these developed nations that they will not hesitate in using space in any future conflict, no matter how limited it is. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end, I once again commend the efforts of Team CAS in organizing GSTAR 2022 with such expanded avenues related to national and international security. I am confident that this year's conference will help create awareness amongst all segments of society, particularly practitioners, about the seriousness of the security environment, both at the global as well as at the regional levels. The invaluable contributions by the distinguished speakers on such sensitive and complex subjects would immensely benefit policymakers, military strategists, students, researchers, media, and the corporate sector in Pakistan. With that, I thank you all. Pakistan Zindabad.
Now, I would like to invite President CAS Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan for a vote of thanks.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Little more than vote of thanks. Honorable Guest of Honor, Air Marshal Zahid Mahmood, Vice Chief of the Air Staff, Pakistan Air Force, former Air Chief Marshal Tahir Rafiq Bhatt, worthy speakers, respected audience at home and abroad, diplomats, the new generation that we tried to pull across from the universities. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning, good evening, afternoon, wherever you are. The Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, as we commonly call it, CAS, was established in 2018 December, just less than 4 years ago, as a think tank to study aerospace and national security in all its domains, to provide research-based policy guidelines to politico-military leadership, policymakers, informed public, intelligentsia, from an independent, non-partisan and futuristic approach, with an aim to grow to be amongst the leading think tanks of the region. CAS has been endeavoring to convey its research-based point of view by constantly extending its outreach through various means like research papers, working papers, books, articles, social and electronic media, by conducting seminars, webinars with its global and domestic partners. GSTAR 2022 is one such effort, an exercise held twice a year. At the culminating stage of the Global Strategic Threat and Response Conference, and after 2 days of hectic but intellectually rich discourse, various speakers very ably highlighted the political, strategic, economic, technological challenges to security, stability across the globe and in Pakistan. Worthy speakers also recommended various policy options to contribute towards a safe world, stable and peaceful region, and securer Pakistan. A few salient takeaways from the 2 days of proceedings. First, the two important tweets that President of Pakistan made this morning after attending the GSTAR. And I quote, "Due to emerging challenges in different fields, we need to adopt better and more humane policies to create a better and safer world by making collective efforts to encourage innovation, nurture global cooperation, and by motivating the leadership to address the pressing issues confronted by mankind. The second, ensuring provision of health, education, facilities, and food for all should be the goal of the New World Order, which should be based on morality, compassion, and equality amongst the people and nation states. In the first session that we discussed, the subject discussed mainly and extensively was the shift of balance of power from Atlantic to Pacific, followed by Obama's Indo-Pacific strategy. From that, some conclusions. The alliances like AUKUS, Quad, Middle East Quad, politics seems to have accelerated the US-China rivalry that may be heading towards a new Cold War. Political polarization affecting the independence, integrity, and transparency of international financial institutions like FATF and IMF. Therefore, strangulating some of the countries. It is time for major powers to avoid polarization and adopt a cooperative rather than confrontational approach to resolve global issues, as the humanity rightly deserves peace, security, and stability. World powers need to work together in a democratic way to ensure peaceful coexistence, respect for sovereignty of states, shared rather than polarized world. US-India strategic agreements like LAMWA, COMCASA will result in downloading of critical technologies, including dual use, to India. It would be upsetting the regional balance of power in all three dimensions: political, strategic, and economics. An ideal recipe for destabilizing South Asia. Military buildup so achieved would be more for Pakistan specific rather than aiming for China containment, because the tanks don't climb Himalayas. One of the recommendations for Pakistan needs to tread very carefully focusing on its national interests, rather than getting sucked into the US-China rivalry and becoming part of it. On the geoeconomic section, geostrategies and geoeconomics are two sides of the same coin, as narrated by Dr. Moir yesterday. Therefore, these two are interlinked. You cannot have strong geostrategy without a strong economy and vice versa. Pakistan has very carefully taken the course of proceeding on geoeconomics, a difficult course, but needs to be pursued rigorously. On the trade side, when we look at, in the presence of so many learned people, I would not go into figures. If you look at our trade, East-West are almost closed for many years. And we all know what happens when it happens. Most of the trade that takes place, only 10 to 11% is with China. The rest, 90%, is with the rest of the world. Country that we call strategic partner is next door. I think for our own benefit, we need to exploit the Chinese market. Just one figure I would like to mention. Because of the AUKUS and other agreements, MOUs in this area, Chinese have started slightly withdrawing from Australian field. They were importing $50 billion of meat only from Australia. So just imagine if Pakistan can get only 10% of its, our trade will double with China. So there is a need to exploit the Chinese corridor. And CPEC may provide this opportunity. The session on emerging technologies. With developments and induction of new technologies, strategists and practitioners continue to work on strategies to re-establish stability. So it's an ongoing game and a continuous process. Way beyond its defense requirements, induction of emerging technologies by India sets uncontrollable consequences, with strategic stability as its first casualty. Pakistan, unfortunately, has to accept the challenge to take measures to re-establish stability in the region. Great power rivalry is the major driver for technological developments. However, it will take about 15 to 20 years for all these technologies to be operationalized. The last session that we have on the aerospace power, being technology intensive, is becoming or has become an instrument of choice available to the politico-military leadership to achieve their political objective alone or in synergy with other elements of military power. Last, while weaponization is taking place in space, it definitely needs a framework. Presently, it is not controlled by any international norms. So therefore, legal framework is mandatory. Ladies and gentlemen, before we disperse, let me once again thank our worthy panelists from across the globe, as well as Pakistan, for their wholehearted participation in GSTAR. Special thanks to two of our guests who traveled across from United States and Latvia. My very special thanks to Dr. Arif Alvi, President of Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for sparing his time for this event yesterday morning, and Air Chief Marshal Babar Sidhu for not only speaking on the forum, but also unveiling the NESTAP project by using the GSTAR platform. And thanks to Air Marshal Zahid for sparing time for coming this evening for the closing ceremony. Our thanks to Deputy Chief of the Air Staff Training and all PSOs, present or otherwise, and their teams for their patronage and support to GSTAR. I am told that the entire Air Force has been online on YouTube listening to the proceeding. Our special gratitude to few important departments of Pakistan Air Force who were here 24/7 with us. Deputy DG Public Relations, that we used to call media sometimes back, Air Commodore Zeb has been there throughout. Base Commander Islamabad, Air Commodore Suhail Akbar, for everything. I do not have words to mention the kind of support he provided. And the Administrator Air Headquarters Mess, Air Commodore Ayaz Haque, for organizing this occasion. Thank you very much for a job well done, all the support. Last but not the least, my personal appreciation to the entire CAS team for spending busy weeks and months for reaching to this place ahead of the event and burning their midnight oil for all the arrangements. I know some of them have not slept for many nights. So thank you very much for a very splendid effort. Sorry if I have missed any name or a department that supported us, and we thank you all for being with us for 2 days, and see you next time, inshallah, in the next seminar that we have. Thank you very much all.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite President CAS to present memento to our worthy chief guest of honor. Now I would like to invite our guest of honor, President CAS, Deputy Chief of Air Staff Training, our chief guest, moderator, and speakers of session 4 to join for a group photograph. Now I would like to invite the entire CAS team to join us for a group photograph. Now I invite all CAS volunteers to please join for a group photograph. Lastly, on behalf of President CAS and the entire team, I pay my sincere gratitude to all the distinguished speakers and respected audience for joining us today at this seminar and making it a success. We hope that you will honor us with your presence and contributions in future events as well. You are kindly requested to now proceed for